first, and then they made a secondary perforation into the seats. So that's why they're not exactly level.
So, Sergeant, are you saying that the end of these rods is where those shots were fired from?
No,
Why not?
because I'm missing the glass. So the glass would, obviously, if I can take a rod and put it through the glass and then into the terminal point, I would be able to obtain this picture to be demonstrably correct.
Okay, in terms of the angles and things that you measured on these, how did you get those angle measurements?
So what I ended up doing is recreating the back glass based on putting tape across the entire back of the window and making it line up with the glass that's existing in place on the top, sides, and bottom, and lined it up with that to make the arch of the glass window, and then ended up putting these rods into the proper position, and then created by right angles to create the proper angles for these strike marks.
In terms of the location in which the gun was fired that created these defects in the car, can you say it was a certain distance away with specificity?
I can give a range for these shots and for the shots on the side of the vehicle.
Okay. And in terms of the range, are you saying it could be a mile away at a 50-foot ladder?
No, I can give a specific range.
And how can you do that in this case?
So the specific range is based upon the two shooters that were presented to me, and I would obtain measurements.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Can we go side by side?
Okay, so the accident reconstructionist is testifying about the trajectory of the gunshots there, and you saw some photos as that evidence is presented to the jury. Let's bring in my guest to talk about what we're seeing here in this testimony. I have Bridget Williams. She's a criminal defense attorney out of Dallas, Texas. Also with me, Law and Crime Zone, the great Brian Buckmeyer. Bridget, I want to start with you. So yesterday we had testimony from the ME, the medical examiner, and one of those medical examiners testified that she had gone and viewed the car and sort of matched up the trajectory and those rods, those trajectory rods, with the actual bullet entry wounds. What is the significance of the testimony we see now for the prosecution, given that this is a circumstantial case relying heavily on forensics?
They are definitely relying heavily on the forensics here. But this witness is such a great witness for the prosecution. He is doing such a great job at laying out the trajectory of the bullet wounds and of the gunshots as they happened. I'm pretty much convinced that the initial gunshot came from within the vehicle, and then that there were gunshots that came outside of the vehicle from a stationary person. So he's doing a great job there. I would say that I'm looking forward to seeing how the defense handles it and what they do to kind of poke holes in his testimony and to question him and to see exactly what it is that they will come up with on their cross-examination here, though.
Yeah. And Brian, let's talk about that. The defense, they're sitting there, they're gearing up for cross-examination. They're analyzing this evidence as it's being presented in court and this expert's testimony. What do you think their best line of questioning is, given the fact that their theory is that these bullets came outside of the car in terms of a drive-by shooting, yet this is sort of establishing, at least for the prosecution, that these may have been actually internal within that car, those shots being fired?
For lack of a better phrase, I think the theme should be check the math. The way I analogize it to is long division. You look at what number is going into what number and then the answer, and you're like, as a defense attorney, I'm not sure if I can argue the number, but let me check your math. Okay, did you carry the 1 here? Did you divide here correctly? Did you subtract here correctly? And if the defense can do that, they might not even have to say that the bullets came from outside. Simply moving it from the back passenger seat, so the seat directly behind the driver, and moving it maybe to the center, or maybe moving it to behind the passenger, or even moving it to the passenger. Maybe even move it to the driver. If you can move it anywhere from that one seat, because the math was just a little off, you might be able to create more reasonable doubt and destroy the prosecution's case.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, in terms of attacking an expert's methodology on how they came to a conclusion and their opinion is really just as effective, if not more effective, than attacking the conclusion itself. Because if the method in which they got to that point is flawed and you're able to raise some reasonable doubt with that, then you may be able to do away with that expert testimony altogether. We're going to take a quick break here at Law and Crime. When we come back, we're going to do our Q&A session with you, the viewers. Stay tuned.
Poly mailers are a great way to package your products. And with Sticker Mule, ordering custom poly mailers has never been easier or faster. Our custom poly mailers can be printed in full color and shipped within 4 days or less. Each poly mailer is durable and tear resistant, allowing you to ship your t-shirts, products, or startup swag in your custom mailers all over the world. To get started, select a size and quantity. Upload your artwork, then breeze through checkout. Within a few hours, we'll send you an online proof showing how your custom poly mailers will look. You can request changes to the proof for free until you're happy. With easy ordering, fast delivery, and print runs starting at just 10 units, Sticker Mule is the internet's favorite place to get custom poly mailers.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related to your work. Your documents, your chats, your whiteboards, your projects. The value of this, you don't have to buy 5 softwares to do this. You don't have to be hopping back and forth between multiple tabs, trying to find that email from a year ago. Instead, you can find everything in a matter of seconds, keeping your work and everything related to productivity organized in a single place.
Welcome back to Law and Crime, and we are pivoting to our YNW Melly Q&A here on the network while the Broward County courtroom breaks for lunch. Melly, whose legal name is Jamel Demons, faces 2 counts of first-degree murder for the shooting deaths of his 2 friends, Chris Thomas Jr. and Anthony Williams. The victims, along with Demons and his co-conspirator Cortland Henry, were leaving a recording studio in the early morning hours of October 26, 2018, when the incident occurred. Henry and Demons claim that they were part of a drive-by shooting, but the authorities disagree. For the next hour, I will be taking your questions with my expert legal panel. I'm Imran Ansari, filling in for Anjanette Levy, so let's get to your questions right now. Okay, first question, at 205 Serial Killer, and that's with a C, not an S, from YouTube, has a question for Terry Austin. Do you think the jury will question the credibility of these experts on the stand today? Terry.
Well, I think, yes. I think when we see the cross-examination, the jury will be questioning whether or not this witness, and who's on the stand right now is Sergeant Christopher Williams. He is the crime scene analyst. He's the investigator who looked at this crime scene. He said he found 2 bullets in the car, or 2 projectiles in the car, one under the back seat, one in the B pillar, which covers the seat belt. And he's basically confirming what the medical examiners said yesterday as far as the injuries of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas. I think when you see the cross-examination, you're going to see that they are questioning, and that's going to come later, they're going to be questioning, well, you know, did you for a fact know what the distance was? Because again, we don't know the exact height, we don't know the exact distance, and they're going to be questioning those projectiles. And as a matter of fact, the prosecutor even said these aren't going to be exact distances. So she's trying to take some of the edge off of that testimony when it comes in our cross-examination. But I think to answer the question, basically, yes, the jury is listening. They are thinking right now, probably he knows what he's talking about, but based on cross-examination that I've seen in the past, I think they're going to be questioning, maybe there are some issues that aren't 100% resolved here.
Absolutely, and that is Terry Austin reporting right there in the courthouse, really getting a first-hand view of everything there. And then Terry, I'm sure you're going to be reporting back as to how that cross-examination goes, and we'll be watching that. Also here with me is Law and Crime Zone, also Brian Buckmeyer. And Brian, I'm going to throw this question to you. It's from Dominique Thomas from Facebook, and she asks, is it possible that the car was in a drive-by and the shooter got in the car and shot the other 2 victims? The projectiles just don't seem accurate. What do you think?
So is it possible that it was a drive-by where the shooter was inside? It could be. I mean, it wouldn't be the technical definition of a drive-by. So I think the question would be, why did you describe it like that? Why didn't you just say that someone broke into the car and shot? But it would create a good explanation for the defense as to the shooter being someone else. I've also seen people make a similar argument, Dominique, that I do think it works, that what's to say that someone didn't stop the car, lean in, and shoot at everyone inside the car? That could kind of be like a drive-by, and that could explain that someone else, rather than YNW Melly, did the shooting. The question is, while it's doubt, is it reasonable doubt?
No, absolutely. And I think that sort of forensic evidence regarding where those shots came from is going to be all so important when the prosecution is trying to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's go to our next question. I'm going to throw that to you. Bridget Williams, criminal defense attorney in Dallas, Texas. We have a question from @FeistyGemini2379 from YouTube. And the question is, where exactly is the evidence in this trial? There doesn't seem to be anything that definitively points to him as guilty, which I thought there would be for a death sentence as a punishment option. Defense attorney Bridget Williams, what is your take on the evidence and that question?
Well, there has been some evidence that has been presented by the state here. Is it a definite, is it a slam dunk? Probably not, in my opinion. We're still looking to that. The state isn't over yet. They are still presenting their case. And when we talk about something where the state is seeking the death penalty, It's past just if there was a murder that was committed, then we go on to the aggravated factors that are here. And those aggravated factors that the state is pushing for is, was it a heinous crime? Was it premeditated? And that he was a part of a criminal gang association. And they had some testimony about that previously with the gang expert that came in and testified. And then they also are talking about, you know, those other aggravating factors. So when we talk about, are they seeking the death penalty, they are going over it with those aggravating circumstances. They have presented some evidence, but so far, I don't see a shooting gun that says that it was in fact Melly that committed this offense, though.
Right. Next question is for our boots on the ground reporter, Terry Austin. Terry, Christy Smith from Twitter asks, why didn't he have GSR, gunshot residue, but the co-defendant did? Could they have been shot after he got out of the vehicle?
Well, I tell you, I can guarantee you that's something they're going to focus on during closing as far as the defense is concerned, because Melly did not have GSR on him and Henry did. And I think the argument will be, look, he wasn't there. He wasn't in the car. He might have gotten in the car. And don't forget, we have the video where he's getting into the car. He's getting into the back seat of that car on the driver's side. And that's where they're saying those bullets came from based on the trajectory of those bullets. But I think the issue here is if there's very little DNA of Melly, if there's no GSR, if they don't have the gun, and if they can't prove who was sitting back there and making those gunshots, which they say are the shots that killed the two victims and not the drive-by shots, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think there will be reasonable doubt. And I think it's a very good question because there was no GSR found on Melly anywhere.
Great. Thank you, Terry. And a very good answer from you, Terry. We're going to take a quick break here at Law and Crime, but keep those questions coming. We're going to be back with more Q&A on the YNW Melly trial out of Florida. Stay tuned.
Yeah, shout out to whoever's watching. I forgot to mention here that court doesn't start until 1:15. 1:15. So if you guys got something to do, chill, watch what has conspired so far. They will be back at 1:15.
We're covering the YNW MELLY
So
trial
in another 30
out of
minutes.
Florida, and court is on a lunch break right now. That gives us the opportunity to interact with
But
you,
stay
the viewers,
watching
and
so you
take
guys
your
could actually
Q&A,
see some of the
or
stuff
your
that I
questions
did, that I
and give you
watched,
the
and that I went through,
I have
and
a
I
great,
can
panel with me.
answer some of
Terry
the questions
Austin,
you may
who is
have later.
actually
So
at the
stay
courthouse
tuned.
down there in Florida right now. I have Bridget Williams. She's a criminal defense attorney out of Dallas, Texas. And of course, Brian Buckmeyer is here with me in the studio. Let's get back to your questions. And Brian, this one's for you. It's from Janina, 43. And she wants to know, how are there still any doubts that the victims were shot from inside the Jeep? There were a lot of shell casings found inside the car, as the pictures showed.
Gina 43, thank you for that answer, or for that question, sorry. I don't think there's any doubt. I think at this point, especially we know from the prosecution, this witness is going to be on the stand for 2 days, it's not just beating a dead horse. I think the horse at this point is glue. But of course, I understand the defense is going to make a lot of noise and it could have come from the outside, so cover all your bases. But I think you've done it enough here. I think the better thing for the prosecutor now is to move on and put the gun in YNW Melly's hand. We know where it came from, the shooting, inside, not out. We know that Cortland Henry lied based on the forensics. Move on and tell us something greater. Otherwise, it makes it seem like you can't prove that bigger question and you're focusing on these smaller ones a little too much.
Right, so the prosecution needs to take that glue, put us all together for a neat package with the jury at the end of the day. Next question for you, Bridget Williams. I'm going to send you this one. It's from @MandyMartis402 from YouTube. And she asks, why did none of the experts test for stippling on the victims? That was very important. And the defense team was asking a lot of questions about Melly's text from that phone yesterday. Wasn't that them accepting that it was actually Melly's phone when they have been trying to deny it up until this point?
Okay, well, thank you so much for that question. I'll start with, I guess, the text messages. The text messages that the defense counsel was going over yesterday, he was talking about the connection that Melly may or may not have had with gang affiliation. So he was explaining there, or trying to cover that Melly was somewhat being recruited to be affiliated with the gang there, and that he wasn't necessarily a part of it. And so he continued to ask questions to the gang expert to see if, that showed that he was not in fact a part of the gang, but that he was being recruited about it. There were several text messages that the person that was involved in the gang was continuing to ask Melly over and over again. He had no response. I think there was even some testimony that said that some of the text messages asked Melly to post that person on his social media, so Melly could look over some of his records as well, like just communication with him. And so it didn't necessarily tie him to being a gang affiliated, but to show that he was being recruited to be in the gang. And then that alleviates that connection that the state is looking for criminal gang affiliation.
Right. Let's move on to Terry Austin, who is reporting from inside the Broward County courtroom or courthouse. Terry, Styles1211 from Instagram. The question is for you, if they don't find him guilty of first-degree murder, can they find him guilty of a lesser charge?
Well, they haven't included any lesser included charges, but as the evidence presents itself, they can always amend the indictment and add those charges to be the lesser included. I don't think that's going to happen here, and the reason is they've asked for the death penalty, and I doubt very seriously if they will change, their direction and ask for a lesser included. Anything is possible, but all of the evidence the prosecution has put forth so far is pointing to this was, cold, calculated murder is what they're claiming. They're saying that it was heinous and atrocious, and they're saying that it's gang-related. I think it's going to be very difficult to argue an alternate theory with that sort of charge that they've done so far. He has those 2 murder charges, and they're asking for that death penalty. So it's possible. We've seen it in other cases. I don't think that'll happen here, but we'll wait till the end of all of the evidence, and maybe with the defense evidence, there will be something else that they can look at as far as those charges are concerned.
Absolutely. And Dariha from YouTube has a question specifically for you, Brian. The prosecutor said in the opening the victims died at the scene, but McDougal said the victims died at the hospital. Does that affect the credibility of the case at all?
Well, Dariha, first of all, eagle eye spot on that one. I missed that as well. I think it could affect the case, if at any, in terms of like one more piece, one more bit of sand on the pile of, does the prosecutor have the credibility in front of the jury that they want? Whenever you give an opening statement, whether you're a defense attorney or prosecutor, and Imran, please jump in on this and tell me if you agree afterwards. I always say you want to underpromise and overperform. Because if you do it the other way around, viewers like you are going to do exactly this and say, wait a second, you said this, but it ended up being that. You also said this, and it ended up being that. And if it starts to get kind of like a waterfall of just more and more of that, then come summation time, the jury's going to say, you know what, either one, I don't believe the prosecutor, and I believe the defense more, and I'll go this way, or I don't believe any of you all. Give us all of the exhibits, all of the evidence, and we as a jury are going to figure this out because both of you don't know what you're figuring out. As a defense attorney, I get scared if that happens. I want to be the most reliable and credible person in the room, so I want to make sure that what I tell you in opening happens during the trial, and I remind you again in closing. So for even a little mistake like that, I do think so, it could have some effect.
Yeah, Brian, I absolutely agree with you, especially when you have reason to believe that maybe some of your evidence is not going to come in at trial. You never want to mention that. You never want to promise something you can't deliver, or the jury is going to suspect something about your case possibly. Bridget, I want to go to you for the next question. It's from @TTech from YouTube, who asks, why is the prosecution allowed to be admitting new reports that were reevaluated June this year? They've had 4 years to put the case together and only found all these issues recently. How's that fair to the defense?
Well, the state has the opportunity to continue to do research as they continue throughout their investigation. So they have the right to do that. The issue is, as long as they alert the defense counsel about it and defense counsel knows about it and it comes in before trial, then it's perfectly fine. And there was some issues prior during the trial where the prosecution tried to bring in some evidence that the defense stated that they had no idea about and that it was a matter of surprise. And when that did happen, the judge did the right thing here and he just didn't allow that into evidence. So that did happen here. But as long as everyone is on the same page, the prosecution has brought up that evidence to defense counsel, they know about it, and everyone knows about what's going on, then it's perfectly fine.
Okay, and Terry Austin, I'm going to throw this last question before we take a break to you. It's from Chris Carney from YouTube. And Chris wants to know, if you were the defense team, what questions would you ask Sergeant Williams during cross-examination?
Well, I think what we're going to see from defense counsel is questioning about, was he there? He does not really know. These are guesstimates. They're talking about geometry and using the Pythagorean theory, and that's how he's calculating these projectiles and how the bullets were shot inside the car and how the bullets from outside the car were shot and he was standing still, whoever the shooter was. So I think all of that is going to be questioned, and he's going to have to explain, well, you know, you're right. I don't have the exact answer. He's already basically said he can't give specific distances and he can't give all of those estimates that are, the estimates that we're all looking for. He can't give it exactly. And so I do think that that's something that we're going to see during the cross-examination of this sergeant. Now, he's been promoted. I think other than that, he's educated. He has a great background. He's been on the force for a while. I do also think that the defense is going to ask about, what do you think about the Miramar Police Department's investigation? Because there were a couple of times during the direct exam that he mentioned, the police did not look out in the area where I looked. I went back and I looked. And if you recall, we heard during the defense opening that the Miramar Police Department was criticized for not doing a thorough investigation. So I think I would ask about that as well. And he may actually be one of the people who said, it was an atrocious investigation, but I would definitely question the shoddiness or the thoroughness of those investigations.
Yeah, we're going to be waiting to see that cross, but right now we're going to take a quick break. Keep those questions coming. On the other side of the break, we're going to be giving you some answers and taking more questions. Stay tuned here at Long Crime. Okay, welcome back to Law and Crime, and this is our Q&A session. Court is on their lunch break at the YNW Melly trial. That gives us the opportunity to take your questions and answer them with our great legal panel. And I have one question coming in right now for you, Bridget Williams. It's from Musical Jujutsu from Instagram. And the question is, if it is shown that the shooting could have taken place in the car, why wasn't there gun residue on him? Would he have had the time to change in there on the way to the hospital if he may have had a spare change of clothes with him?
That's a great question. I would say, starting out, one, that the gun residue, the prosecution hasn't really talked a lot about the gun residue, if it was on Melly or not. And if I were the prosecutor, I would be talking about that more. I feel like they should be really discussing that more if they had evidence to show that. And so if they don't have evidence to show that there was gun residue on Melly, then that definitely puts a hole in their prosecution. Now, that gives the defense counsel some really good leeway there to talk about, well, the gun residue was not found on Melly, and that the state has not really brought that up or has discussed that. And so that's a really great point for the defense to talk about as they continue on and when their cross-examination happens, along with when they put their own expert witness up, if they choose to do that. And if they decide that they're going to put up any other witnesses, that's going to be a great point for the defense.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be one point of reasonable doubt that the defense is going to be looking to hit home with the jury. Brian Buckmeyer, next question is for you. It's from @JustBrit910 from Twitter. The question is, so let's say it was a staged drive-by. Couldn't Melly have been dropped off somewhere and Cortland did this? He could have plotted this with Juvie, and after Juvie shot Sack, Cortland turned on Juvie and shot him. And also, these seem to be the best 2 days for the prosecution.
So I'll work backwards. I agree with you. This seems to be a better day for the prosecution. The trajectory of where the bullets came from, narrowing it down to a specific seat that we know that YNW Melly, at least at one point when he entered the vehicle, was sitting. That's strong evidence for them. But I agree with you as to your first part of your question, because I'm thinking about the cell phone tracking, where the two cell phones were together, traveling, then at some point they're separate. But they don't really have a timeline of what's going on when they're separate. So yeah, maybe YNW Melly leaves the vehicle and then the shooting happens afterwards. If I'm a defense attorney, I'm gonna tie that into the fact that no GSR, no gunshot residue was on Melly at the time. Because if you shoot a gun, the GSR ends up on you because of your hand and whatnot. But if you shoot a gun in a small confined area, GSR is on everyone. And so if there's none on Melly, maybe yes, he did get out of the car before this all went down. And maybe yes, he doesn't know exactly what's going on. So I think great question, absolutely a possibility. Again, is it doubt? Yes. Is it reasonable? It's up for the 12 people to decide.
Right. I think the defense is going to be going for a death of 1,000 cuts of reasonable doubt against this prosecution case, and that could be another cut right there. So next question for you, Terry. It's from Paragon from YouTube. The question is, why isn't the prosecutor not trying to show how Bortland isn't the shooter? I feel that this would give the jury more information on why this point towards Melly.
Well, I think the prosecution has to go with the evidence, and the evidence that they have so far, the best evidence they have so far, is from those two medical examiners, and right now, Sergeant Christopher Williams on the stand. And that evidence is showing that the bullets were shot from the back seat and into Anthony Williams, and from the back seat into Christopher Thomas. And so they know for a fact when the people got into the car, they're saying Melly got into the back seat. So to say that the driver, Henry, was the one who did the shooting, I think would be antithetical to the evidence that they have. So the prosecution always has to go by that evidence. And right now, the evidence is pointing to someone who's sitting in the back seat. What they still have to do, and they haven't done yet, is to say that it was Melly in that car. Like Brian just mentioned, he could have gotten out of the car and someone else could have been sitting back there and doing the shooting. We actually don't have a gun in Melly's hand doing that shooting yet.
Yeah, and we spoke about this a little yesterday, this next question. and Bridget, I want to get your take on it. It's from K-Bands from YouTube. And K-Bands asked, regardless of the outcome of both trials, what's the chance a RICO happens? It seems like the state could have enough evidence for that.
Well, we don't know. The state may have an opportunity to do that. We just have to see how it goes. The state here has really focused their attention on Melly in this case. I'm interested to see how this continues to play out in Melly's case, and then when they again retry this case, really with Henry. And see how that plays out first, and then we'll, see if they even decide that they're going to move forward with a RICO type of situation. But right now, it's just the focus is on this particular trial. Is Melly convicted of the murder case, and then if so, do they have enough evidence to move forward with the death penalty or not?
Right. And Brian, next question for you is from Gavin Carey from YouTube, who asked, do you think that Melly will have the death penalty thrown out based on expert witnesses' testimony? It did not prove gang affiliation, more of association.
Yeah, I think yes, but so one, thank you for that question. Two, I think you're spot on. I think the idea of association rather than affiliation is smart. I would also ratchet it one more up. That's the First Amendment. You have the right to associate. It's not illegal to be a part of organizations or groups. That's why it's not illegal to be a part of like the KKK. It's not illegal to be a part of gangs. It's what you do within those groups that can be illegal. And so I think you're 100% right there. You're probably a future lawyer in the making. But I think that's almost putting the cart before the horse, because I'm not quite sure they can get a conviction yet. They've got to get the conviction before we have this conversation, but I think you're looking far ahead, and I think you are right in your analysis.
Right, and let's go to Bridget for the next question. It is from, actually this one's for you, Terry. Sorry, Bridget. It's from See Through You from YouTube, who wants to know, do you think the prosecution chose to prosecute Melly first to scare Cortland Henry into turning for the state?
Whoa, that's a great question. Oftentimes when you do have two co-defendants, one could turn on the other. Originally, this case was together. We had Henry and Melly who were being tried together, but it was severed. And so now Henry will come after Melly. And I do think there is some finger pointing already in this case. We have seen reference by defense counsel to the fact that it was Henry who went into that hospital and who basically initially lied to the police officers that he spoke to. It wasn't Melly who told, a lie. So he is essentially saying, don't forget, look at Henry, there's someone else too. Now, they haven't come right out and pointed the finger, and there hasn't been any evidence of them pointing the finger, but he did mention that during the opening statement. I think Henry will get the benefit of this trial to see what happens here. Obviously, if there's an acquittal, I think fingers will be pointing to Henry, and the prosecution will probably use that to go after Henry even further. I don't know what theory they're going to use if there's an acquittal here, but they'll somehow come up with a trajectory of the bullets that could have come from the front, or they'll have to change their tune at that point.
Right.
But definitely they can point together.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you for the questions there. We're going to be cutting out the Q&A right now, but thank you for your contributions. Stay tuned here at Law and Crime.
Webstaurant Store for whatever your restaurant needs. Most products ship free with Webstaurant Plus.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Imran Ansari, and we continue to follow the trial of Jamel Demons, better known as YNW Melly. The South Florida rapper is on trial, accused of a double murder for the 2018 shooting deaths of Anthony Williams, also known as YNW Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., also known as YNW Juvie. All are part of the YNW collaborative, along with co-defendant Cortland Henry, who will be tried in a separate case. Now, today is day 10 of the trial, and we are hearing testimony from Sergeant Christopher Williams, a shooting reconstruction expert. While court is still on their lunch recess, let's recap key parts of his testimony from earlier today.
Do you recall at what point you were first contacted to assist in this case?
I believe it was November of 2020.
Okay. With regards to that, who contacted you?
You, ma'am.
Okay. What were you asked to look at and analyze in this case?
I was asked to determine if this shooting incident was a drive-by shooting.
So, if there was any other forensic testing that could be done, did you suggest that as well?
Yes.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
If you could just briefly, were you asked to consult at all with regards to cell phones?
No.
Any sort of location data or anything with regards to the location of an individual?
Location data, No. Location of an individual, yes.
And that's within the car?
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the physical evidence that you reviewed. Did you review the car in question in this case?
Yes.
Where was that car being held and stored?
That car was being held at the Broward Sheriff's Office confiscation warehouse.
In terms of in this warehouse, are the cars sealed individually in each location?
Yes.
What types of materials are used to prevent cross-contamination from the various cars?
All of the cars are closed. They are sealed with red evidence tape. If windows are missing, plastic goes over them so that nothing can get into the car. The plastic would assume the role of windows so that nothing can get inside.
Okay. In terms of the security of that building, is anyone allowed to come and go into that building?
Absolutely not.
When you are doing an analysis of this Jeep, this car in this case, how do you do that?
So in this case, I actually had the vehicle in question towed from the confiscation warehouse to the crime scene unit, which has a forensic processing garage. And from there, I began my investigation on the vehicle.
In terms of the image that we're looking at here, can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where that blowback pattern was?
It would be in... Is there a way to make it circle?
Would you like to draw?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be in this area right in here. It's a little bigger than I drew, but it's in this general area right here.
Okay. In terms of the information about that DNA, why is it important to know whose DNA that is?
Well, it's unusual to have the blowback on the headliner, so of course, and for this shooting incident, we would want to identify where that blood came from. So that's why it was sent to the lab to determine whose blood it was.
And was that determination made?
It was.
Okay. And whose blood was that?
That was the front seat passenger's blood.
In terms of the location and the pattern, what does that tell you about the orientation of the front seat passenger's head at the time of the shooting?
The front seat passenger's head was actually down almost as if he was sleeping, so it was down, leaning on the right at an angle. So his head was at an angle as he was seated in that front seat.
And based on your analysis of this vehicle, did you find any projectiles anywhere in the headliner?
No.
Did you find any projectiles in the top portion of the B pillar on the passenger side?
No.
What about the A pillar?
No.
Was there any projectiles in the front windshield?
No.
Based on your training and experience, can you state where the exit wound of that head had to have gone through? Where that projectile would have had to have exited that vehicle?
It would have exited through the front passenger window.
How can you say that?
Number one, there's no glass there. However, most importantly is the projectile entered in the back of his skull and exited through the front of his skull with his head at a resting angle. So, can I get up?
Please, that would help and assist in showing.
So this resting angle in this seat, you have the projectile coming in, exiting through the top of the skull, and then continuing through the windshield.
You said windshield.
Or, I'm sorry, the window.
Can you say that it was at the top of the window, or the bottom of the window, the middle of the window?
I cannot.
So based on that projectile and the blowback, you can make what opinions?
So based on the angle of this this projectile, the blowback is indicative of a firearm being in close vicinity of the head. The head is something that bleeds profusely when it's pierced. If you've ever fallen on stairs or hit your head, it bleeds like no tomorrow. And because the projectile entered in right below the skull, the blowback ended up coming in the direction of, as I was speaking earlier about the hose, in the direction that it came from. And you will get that with a very close shot. That blowback then proceeded after the shot. It went up, it hit this headliner, and continued and falling into the back seat.
Does this attempt to accurately recreate the potential location of that firearm?
So the purpose of this photograph is strictly demonstrative, to show where once the projectile enters into the head, you're going to have the blowback, which again will come up, strike the headliner, and then continue. It's actually continuing this way and landing back here behind the driver in this area of the vehicle.
In terms of the driver and the t-shirt that he was wearing, do you take into account the location of the victim's DNA on his shirt?
Well, based upon the blowback pattern up here, I would expect to find some blowback here on a driver, if a driver was there.
So would you expect to find the DNA of Anthony Williams on the front of the driver's shirt?
Yes.
Okay. And were you made aware that that is the results that were in this case?
Later on, yes.
And in terms of how does that help with the check and balance on your work?
So that confirms my analysis with the blowback, that the blowback came back, like I said, went up, it's going to fall here, and then it's going to continue to fall into this back seat.
So I want to move on again, and you talked about like a wound that was close. Do you look for things like stippling in photographs?
Yes, so we'll look for
of the deceased Anthony Williams.
Yes, there was some there. However, due to the fact that Anthony Williams has an intermediate object, i.e. the head back, what do that call?
Headrest.
The headrest.
That's the word you're looking for? Okay.
Due to the headrest being there, that's an intermediate item. So the projectile was able to go into into Anthony Williams. However, whenever you fire a gun, you have gunshot residue that's going to come out of the barrel and out of the ejection port. In this case, because of the position of Mr. Williams' head and the intermediate object of the headrest assumed most of the GSR, the gunshot residue, and then only some of it went into Mr. Williams.
Without a pattern, can you give any sort of a range of distance?
No, I cannot.
Okay, so let's bring in my guest, Aaron Reed. He is a criminal defense attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. Aaron, let's talk about some of Sergeant Williams' testimony here regarding aspects of his findings inside that vehicle. I'll start with the blowback pattern. What do you make of that testimony in terms of the blowback pattern, what he observed in the vehicle, and on also the decedents, and how is that significant to the prosecution's case?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. The blowback and blood spatter, these are things that prosecution tends to use in these cases. When you see a close range gunshot in a tight confined space like a car, you're expecting blood to kind of fly everywhere. And when you see these patterns and you see the front right passenger, his blood on the driver and vice versa, that shows that these two may have been shot in close proximity inside of the car. So that's what they're really using it for, to try to negate the
So, okay. Regardless of the fact them getting shot in the car and there being, like he said, you know, not blood everywhere all over the car, because they did get hit a lot of times, is weird. And two, you know, the defense is going to come in and say, okay, so if you guys are stating that he shot from the rear driver's side passenger seat. Okay, so he's in the rear behind the driver and he aimed the gun at the passenger and shot. Okay. What the defense is going to say is, one, the blood pattern, two, the gunshot residue. It would have been all over the back seat as well. It would have been within the back seat where Melly was supposedly sitting. Too close, you know, the words right there, proximity. Too close. We're like in a fishbowl shooting at each other. There's going to be evidence everywhere. So the fact that there is no gunshot residue in the back seat, the shot that there was no gunshot residue on Melly, and the fact that there is gunshot residue on the driver and the driver's hands now makes things even more I mean, the way the prosecution is like saying, I mean, it would have had to been Melly in the backseat shooting the passenger, and then the driver, pretty much Cortland, shooting the dude next to Melly from the front. And it would have had to have happened damn near at the same time. And then they say after the occasion, Sack Chaser was shot a couple more times after he was dead. That's what the examiner said. The examiner said based off the body trauma and, you know, how many cases she's done in comparison to people getting just shot and dying, and then people dying and getting shot. I guess the body traumas differently. And they were breaking that stuff down earlier too. So honestly, man, I'm gonna be honest, this kind of just made me even more confused than I was before. Because now they're painting a different story of who the shooters are, where the shooters were, and what they think happened with Melly in the back seat. Now it looks like they're gonna try to turn and say, well, both these guys were the shooters, and they did them execution style inside of the car. But we'll see.
The evidence, and they have to put the shooting coming from that spot because that's where Melly was seated in the car when he left the recording studio. So they're trying to put that together to make the jury see, see, he was sitting there. He must have shot him from this angle. And I think that kind of testimony can be unbuttoned a little bit by a skillful cross-examination, which I expect to happen.
Right. Great analysis there, Aaron Reed. We're going to take a quick break here in Law and Crime. When we come back, more coverage of the YNW Melly trial. Stay tuned at Law and Crime.
I don't know about y'all, but that interaction and them coming out of the studio just looks funny. Like everybody's like, I don't know, bro. I've been in situations before. kind of looked like everybody was like calm but tense. I can't even explain it. Something could have very well happened inside that studio. I don't know, man. We will be back. They're about to jump in. They were supposed to start at 1:15. They were supposed to be back from lunch at 1:15. We already know how this trial's gone so far. They pretty much come back when they want to, which is crazy because we are all waiting. We got stuff to do. But that don't matter, right? So 1:15, they were supposed to come back. Hopefully they'll be back soon. Until then, I mean, if you missed anything so far, it was medical examiners testifying to the gunshot wounds and the kind of trauma the bodies suffered through this shootout or murder or whatever happened. And then after that, the defense touched on, you know, little stuff with the examiner. Really didn't dig into too much because, I mean, realistically, the examiner is just there testifying to, hey, they got shot. This person looks like he was shot and then died. And then this person looks like they were shot, may have died, and then shot again. That's pretty much what the medical examiner's testimony was. And then this guy that came in trying to show trajectory, pretty much where the bullets went, where they were coming from, you know. And like the guy said right before he left, you know, they know Melly was in the back seat, so they're trying to, like, no matter which way this evidence may show, I think they're literally stuck on, oh, we're gonna focus on how this came from this side of the car. And I'm confused still because I looked at the car and they showed the trajectory, and I'm like, well, how could he have shot them? How? Okay, I get the backseat part where they're trying to say he may have shot through the headrest, but like, okay. Then the other ones, there's so many other bullets that just like don't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to what they're showing so far based on what they've shown to say, hey, you know, he's definitely a lock on shooting, because there's so many bullets and there's not even enough evidence in the car. They don't have enough evidence in the car to paint the picture, guys. Come on, man. We know how this works. We all seen First 48. We all seen First 48. Either you have evidence and a snitch or some kind of witness that witnessed what happened, and you lock these people up and you charge them with it, or you don't have evidence, and no matter how much you think they did it, and no matter how much you want to lock them up, you kind of can't because you don't really have any evidence. That's kind of where we're at right now. And it's been weeks of this. Same stuff. But today the defense gets to go back and, you know, obviously, I know they're going to attack the trajectory guy. That's for sure. They're going to go after him. And like I said, if I have a bunch of questions, even after he detailed his, you know, his testimony and, you know, how many years he's been working and how many cases he's worked on and how many times he's testified, even after all of that, I still didn't know. I still wasn't convinced of what they were saying.
Welcome back to Law and Crime, and we continue to follow the trial of Jamel Demons, better known as YNW Melly. While we wait for court to return from their lunch break, we are recapping the testimony from earlier today from Sergeant Christopher Williams, who is a shooting reconstruction expert.
Here you guys go.
And a witness for the
if
state.
You did not
let's
see,
hear more of his
pay
testimony
attention
from
to this, man.
today.
Pay attention to this.
Did you review the medical examiner's report for the backseat passenger, Christopher Thomas?
I did.
Who was it that noticed a mislabeled entrance and exit wound?
I noticed that.
And what did you do when you realized that there was an issue or concern with the report?
I notified you that there was an issue, that a defect in Mr. Thomas was labeled twice.
Okay. And so what, after that was done, did you look through the photos from the hospital?
I did, because I observed that Mr. Thomas had a defect on his right calf area, or I'm sorry, quadricep area, the upper part of his leg. That came from the door,
Right.
and it entered into the seat.
So he would have been
when
shot.
I was looking at the autopsy
Not
photos of
from inside
Mr.
the car,
Thomas,
from outside the
I would
car, he would have been
expect to
shot,
find
and it would have hit him in his
an
right
exit
thigh, like pretty much
from
upper thigh,
the medical examiner's office,
and then it landed in the
and
seat.
they did not have a picture to produce that, and it wasn't annotated in their report. So again, I notified you of this discrepancy as well.
Okay. Discrepancy in phone records, discrepancy in who legally owns the phone, who doesn't, discrepancies as far as this goes. Like, how do you have discrepancies when it comes to gathering information in a murder scene, bro? Like, who do you got taking care of these murder scenes? Like college students? Come on, man. Let's get it together. How you got an indiscrepancy in your reports? And now you guys are literally recreating the story then. Now because there was somebody screwed up in the medical examiner's office. Now you guys are recreating the story that fits your narrative.
And in terms of...
Here we go, we back. Let's get it. Everybody who left, shame on you. You missed out. Shame on you.
Sergeant Williams, I want to go back and follow up on a couple of those things that we were waiting on. I'm going to start with this yellow raincoat that the blood was testified to as the blood of Anthony Williams. We were talking about that in connection with the blowback on that. Can you comment as to the location, if that would be consistent with it being in that location when the blowback from Anthony Williams' head wound occurred?
I don't think that it went back that far. Can you zoom in a little?
Sure.
And unblur it?
I'll go to the next photo on that one, make it a little bit easier to see.
To me, that looks more like a transfer stain.
Okay.
Because it has smear in it with a drop of blood that's already dried, and so the blood is already dried and is transferred. So I think that's I believe that's a transfer stain with a hand.
Okay. So to go back to the photos that you had taken. For photo 6691 on this, what are you demonstrating in this photo?
This is a demonstrative photo that would show if an individual was seated in the rear passenger seat behind the driver, would be able to obtain a shot into the front seat passenger.
And in terms of the individuals that are in this car, how are they attired?
Mr. Williams had...
And sorry, let me clarify on that one. The people that are pictured in the photo,
oh, yes.
What do they have on to protect them?
That's 1, 2, let's see, 1.
So going on to this...
I counted 7
photo,
shots
here.
It is a
coming
photo
from the
other
back
side of the
seat.
vehicle for its demonstrative only.
What number?
6693. I'm sorry. 6692, now moving on to 6693.
And it's just an additional angle. It's all angles from the vehicle.
And in terms of, there's a marker spot there, the red marker on the back of that individual's head in the front seat. What is that showing?
That is the approximate entry point for the defect on Anthony Williams.
Okay, so that would make no sense, Papa Chulo, Papacito. Okay, look at the back seat, right? The back seat has their holes. There's a hole coming through this back headrest that literally goes all the way through and jams whoever this is in the back. If there's no one still sitting up here, if there was someone sitting up here, person in this seat would have caught this shot. Would have caught all 7 of those shots at the bottom. I counted 7, and then obviously that would be 8 shots. But look at this, real quick. I want you to see something. He kind of pointed something out that don't make no sense, right?
92, now moving on to 6693.
Let's stop this right here. Nope, they got a better view of it in a second. Hold on.
Additional angle. It's all angles from
They
the
got a
vehicle.
better view of it in 1 second. Right here. Okay. So remember what I said. The shot that came through the back seat landed right at the bottom of this headrest, which would have shot this person in the back. And I'm not saying that that's what happened. But what I'm saying is, if you caught a shot right here, sitting in that same situation, like let's just say this is what they're saying. Guy was sitting back in his chair and YNW Melly shot him through the back seat. Where's the holes? There's no way he would have been able to shoot him in this position in the back of the head where that red dot is at, where they said he initially took the first shot, and there's no holes in the headrest, bro.
And in terms of
unless he would have did something like this where he went around the headrest and shot him. But you're pointing.
The approximate entry point for these.
Peep what I'm saying. There would have been a hole in the headrest at the top. There would have been a hole in the headrest, like right around there, right around where that shot was. Look, right around here.
6696.
I'm a photographer, bro. No matter what angle you put that at, where you had that red dot, that's accurate, and where his head is at, it's impossible. You would have saw the bullet hole there.
Those are the trajectory rods.
And you would have saw blood all over that, right? This whole, this
6697.
I don't know, bro.
That's another photo from the rear of the vehicle.
I guess I watched too many movies, and movies, I guess, are different.
Again, for demonstrative purposes, to show a distance range, and a firearm can still.
Yeah, but where's the shot and where's the bullet hole? There's no bullet hole. Y'all see what I was talking about, right? Like that shot from the back would have hit the bottom of that headrest, so it would have damaged the headrest.
The rear passenger.
But
are you using the same demonstrative model for this individual?
Yes.
Okay. So you talked about the blood from Cortland, or the driver, Cortland Henry's shirt on the front. Was there also an analysis done of the blood on the back of Cortland Henry's shirt?
By the crime lab, yes.
Okay. And were you made aware of the results of the DNA of the blood sample on the back?
Objection, hearsay. Excuse me. Watch him, son. Sustain the objection, never mind. Just sustain. Rephrase your question.
So, Detective Williams, there's testimony before this jury as to the person who contributed the blood to the back of that shirt. How does that information help your analysis in terms of the shooting inside the car?
The information was learned by me after the fact, and
Objection, hearsay.
I'm not how it helped, not what the information was.
Go ahead.
and it helped to solidify my analysis.
Okay. In terms of, based on the information that you have, can you state how the driver was positioned when the shots occurred for the backseat passenger, Mr. Thomas?
The driver, in my opinion, was seated in the front seat when the shots were fired inside the vehicle.
And in terms of how would blood get on the back of the shirt?
Because he's seated in that position.
Okay. So I want to ask, can we put some chairs here to help demonstrate what we're talking about?
Sure.
Yeah, I want to see this because I'm gonna keep it 100. Like you can, all right, with so many shots going off, you can paint the picture that anybody shot the guy in the front seat, but the guy in the back seat, you gotta, for Melly to have just, you know,
Is there a difference in the height?
it would have blew the window out. It would have had blood everywhere.
And so this is not anywhere close to exact. Is that a fair statement with the chairs here?
Correct.
So, when you demonstrate if you were the driver, how you would be positioned when the individual sitting in the rear passenger side seat is shot. If you could step down and show how would.
What do you mean? He could be sitting anyway. He could be driving. He could be looking back. We could be stopped. I could have clapped him myself. Like, come on. What do you mean? He would be sitting? It's so stupid.
And not moving the blood
Mute myself.
From this individual, from the blowback, lands here, and blood from this individual lands on the back. And it's all from just not moving.
Okay. In terms of the back of the seat, is his back pressed against the back of the seat?
Yes,
Okay. And that for the first individual or the second individual?
for both.
Okay. In terms of, and you can resume your seat, we'll come back to this in a moment. So in terms of the distance.
Guys, let me help y'all understand what she's trying to implicate here. She's trying to say that the way Cortland was sitting and how Melly shot old boy in the back, that the blood and the DNA projectiled onto the back of Cortland's shirt, okay, while he was driving the car like this, with the seat hugged up against him, right? It landed on the back of his shirt, whatever they're trying to say now. But it didn't go all over the passenger door and window and all that shit in the back.
Between the individual in the rear driver's side seat and Mr. Thomas in that.
So it just got on his shirt, but it didn't.
Distance they were separated by.
Can you restate that?
Sure. The individual, whoever was in the rear passenger seat on the driver's side, and then Chris Thomas, who is in the rear passenger seat passenger side. Is there a minimum distance that they're separated by?
There is.
And how do you know that?
So we have a known distance. As I said earlier, we are confined to the inside of this vehicle. So we have a known distance of shoulder width inside the back seat of this vehicle. We know a distance of shoulder width of Mr. Thomas, and then we would be able to deduce the difference between the center console and another passenger.
So in terms of the photos at the Jeep when it first came to the hospital, are you aware of how the back center console was positioned?
Yeah, it was down just like that.
And showing from what's been previously admitted into evidence as states 30, photo DSC_0127. Is that important for your reconstruction?
Correct. So this is the blood that is on the center console is consistent with Mr. Thomas crumbling into the position above or onto the center console of the back seat.
So the next photo in that series, again from States 30, is that one shows DSC_0133. Is this the plastic bag you spoke about and processed?
Yes.
Going back to your photos, what are you demonstrating in CSW underscore 6716?
So this is a demonstrative photograph to show that you can fire a firearm from that position in the direction of a passenger who would be seated in that seat.
Okay.
Oh,
Now,
man.
looking from the
Okay,
other
guys.
angle, what do you?
Guys, let me explain something to you. I'm gonna keep it 100, bro. This Jeep is way too clean. Did they clean it? Cause I'm confused, bro. I'm not a specialist, man. I'm not a trajectory specialist. But look at the way he would have shot him. He would have shot him, and that would have gone everywhere in that car,
in this
bro.
photo, what
Everywhere.
the defensive wound. Why is that important for you as a shooting reconstructionist?
Because it lets me know that Mr. Thomas was not aware of what was going on. He was taken by surprise, and his hands being up. If his hands were down, he would not receive a projectile through his thumb. His hands are in an up position, almost saying, maybe don't shoot, or I relinquish or something, but he receives a defensive wound due to that projectile, and I think at that point he repositioned to be forward facing.
Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to approach with the ME photos, which are state 75. I'm showing you what's been previously admitted as state 75. Which hand is pictured with the wound in photo 12 on that exhibit?
It's the left hand.
Yo, good luck for the stream, for sharing the stream. I appreciate that. Whoever just shared the stream, I appreciate you.
So continuing on with regards to, we talked about, you can state that the front passenger side door, that the window was taken out by the projectile from Mr. Williams' head.
Correct.
Can you testify as to whether or not the door was open?
I cannot. I have no idea if the door was open or not.
Okay. As to the door next to Mr. Thomas,
Kind of makes.
the rear passenger side door, can you testify, give any opinion as to the state of that door when the shot to the face took place?
No.
Why not?
Well, I believe, actually, let me recant. I believe the door was closed. There is actually a projectile that goes through Thomas's door during this incident and actually enters into the driver rear door.
The driver rear door. Okay.
Correct.
So, I want to, in terms of the driver rear door, is open or closed?
I believe this door, the door that you asked about, was closed.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I just clarify what door we're talking about?
That's what I'm getting ready to do.
Christopher Thomas's door.
Okay, so we're clear here for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. If this is the seat for Mr. Thomas, the door that was right to the right of him, you believe was closed.
Correct.
And why can you say that?
Because we have a projectile that enters in this door and travels across the vehicle and into the other door, into the back passenger, the driver passenger door.
So the door here on to the left, if you're facing forward in the car, the door to the left of Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. Can you state how that door was positioned during the drive-by, the stage drive-by?
So after Mr. Thomas was shot, the door of the backseat passenger, driver back door, was in an open position.
How can you tell that?
It was in an open position because of the projectile strike, the projectile that I spoke about earlier that enters in from the passenger side rear door, travels across the vehicle and enters into the door panel of the driver's side rear door.
Okay, so I'm going here to photo 6733 that you took. There's now another individual outside the car. What is this individual in this photo trying to demonstrate?
This is another demonstrative of an alternative theory.
Okay.
Of if a shot could be obtained from a person outside of the vehicle.
Okay, and so you mentioned we were talking about the one that goes through into the door here. Where did it strike that driver's side rear door?
It struck it where the speaker is.
Okay.
And it struck, so if you have a picture of the door, you'll see that the speaker is whole, and then it has, because it's a speaker, so it's pretty thick, and the projectile actually entered on the front of this speaker. If the door was in the closed position, the projectile should have went into the speaker.
6733.
This one right here is 6733. Okay. So, and there's some other photos that I'll come back to from Miramar to discuss that one. But right here, so you're saying an alternative proposition is being demonstrated by 6733.
Yes.
Are you able to rule this out as a possibility?
Yes, because number one, the angle would not be able to be obtained into Anthony Williams. Number two,
they're gonna destroy
if the
that.
shot was made, the blowback would be more of a vertical blowback.
He didn't necessarily have to be shooting right at the window though, Bob. He could have been outside, bro. People could shoot from a distance. Like, what are you talking about, my boy?
So because
they're gonna
of
debunk
where
the shit
we're
out of
at,
that.
as you stated earlier, of being how the seats are and the closeness, this is a little further away, so you're not going to obtain as much blowback to be able to hit up here, and the blowback would come this way, back that way.
Okay.
It wouldn't go any other way.
So I want to go, so we've gone through, that was 6733. So going to I want to go back a little bit on the angle for Mr. Thomas from that alternative proposition. So we're going to go to 6722. And what are you demonstrating in
individual reaching into the vehicle to fire a weapon at Mr. Thomas.
And in terms of the shot, could the individual get that angle if from outside?
So if the individual could obtain that angle and make that shot, unfortunately they would have to be the arm would have to be completely up against the passenger. So in the photo here, the person represented with sunglasses, the arm of the shooter would have to be completely against that person to make that shot. And I don't believe that this scenario is feasible.
Okay.
That's crazy, bro. How they try to make things so difficult, bro. This shit happens every day. People do this every day.
Now that was 6723. Are you showing the same
You
thing?
telling me
Yes.
somebody can't shoot somebody through the driver's
Going
side,
to
rear passenger, whatever you want to call it, and hit the guy in the back seat from that angle?
What are you demonstrating with this trajectory rod and this photo?
So this is the suspected trajectory of the flight path of the projectile that went into Anthony Williams. Again, as I stated, Mr. Williams had his head canted to the right, which is the reasoning for the flight path and its continued perforation into the window, perforated the window and exited the vehicle.
So, Sergeant Williams, I want to ask, were the driver's side window intact?
Yes,
Were you provided the keys to the car to be able to turn power on and to put them down for purposes of pictures if need be?
yes.
So on 6732, what is, you showing the same thing as the last photo?
Correct. This is another demonstrative with the firearm canted and a downward with the ejection port facing down. And again, you would literally have to be leaning into the vehicle and onto the person who is seated in the rear passenger seat behind the driver in order to obtain that shot.
Okay. And is this the opposite angle?
That's one we already discussed.
Okay. Yes, you're right, 6733. Moving on to 6736.
What was the one just before that?
6735. And so in this instance, is this firearm, the magazine has been removed?
Correct, for safety purposes.
Okay. So going on to, again, like I was saying, 6736. What is this showing?
This is just another demonstrative of the firearm canted with the ejection port down and at an angle. Again, you would have to be pressed up against the back seat passenger that's behind the driver in order to obtain that shot.
Okay. And we'll get into in a little bit with the blue star as to why you put an individual there. So then you've gone on and showing now on 6739. What are you showing on this particular demonstrative photo?
That is a demonstrative photo showing that a firearm can be fired at in the direction of Anthony Williams with the hand and with the elbow up, and the arm does not have to be fully extended in order to fire the firearm.
Okay. So in terms of the trajectories on the back of the car, I'm going to talk a little bit on that aspect. As to one that is labeled A, could you describe where that is on the vehicle?
That is in the rear hatch of the vehicle. It actually perforates the plastic. That whole back of the vehicle where it states Jeep is actually plastic, and it perforates the plastic, perforates the paneling that's on the inside of the vehicle, and it then enters into the bottom of the back seat.
Is that the projectile that you recovered?
Yes.
Okay. Going on to the other ones, we've already looked at 6760 and 6761. on 6755. Are you identifying these by the same letters that the Miramar Police Department assigned them?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the trajectories of B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, were you able to determine if there was a change in the angle of side to side on them?
Meaning a shooter's changing direction?
lanes in a car, let's say.
So the majority of these shots was from a standing, stationary position.
And how can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that fact?
Because it's what's known as in firearms as a grouping. So it's grouped pretty close together, which means that the person's stationary, firing a firearm, and actually creating a grouping of. So if the person's moving, you won't have such a grouping, it'll be scattered.
If the vehicle was moving, would that affect it?
Yes.
In terms of the glass in the back, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury whether or not the rods that are indicated, and again the photo that we just looked at, 6753, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H at the top, I'm going to go to photo 6760, if the glass was in place when they went through?
So I would surmise that the first 2 or 3 rounds took out the glass altogether, and the rest of the rounds were not affected by the glass, and that is evidenced by the firearms unit of our lab being able to positively identify the projectiles, because the glass will make artifacts onto a projectile as the projectile passes through it, and if there's artifacts on there, our lab would not be able to identify those items.
Okay, so you said that you figured 2 or 3. Why would you give a range of 2 or 3 could have gone through the glass?
It's a rather large window. Again, it has the plastic in between it, and it's going to take quite a bit to remove it completely.
Okay. And
now, keep in mind, this is not the way that it was when this vehicle presented itself to the hospital.
okay. And you've reviewed those photos?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go through. Did you turn on power to that Jeep you mentioned?
Yes, battery pack.
Okay. And so the Bluetooth was able to be turned on?
Yes, there's a non-blurry one.
Sorry. In terms of the phones that were the most paired phones on this, what were they?
So we have 5 paired phones on this infotainment center. Number 1 just states iPhone. Number 2 states YNW 'S iPhone. 3 states the same. 4 states YNW TALABAN, and 5 states iPhone.
We talked briefly about the B-pillar column that you recovered that second projectile from. Is this a photo of that B-pillar?
Yes.
Okay. Going forward, what are we looking at in this photo, which for the record is 6773?
So this is actually the perforation site of the B-pillar, of the projectile perforating the B-pillar panel.
Okay. And then once it was removed, and that's in photo 6775 and then 6776, but staying on 6774 right now, what is this picture showing?
That would be the projectile.
Okay. And then 6775.
Is a close-up of the projectile.
So I want to go to the, and then you mentioned on the back, that was, we'd already reviewed that photo, which was 6777.
Yes.
So I want to go to the outside of the vehicle and talk about the impact strikes there. You have rods through I, J, K, L, N, O, and P. Why not M?
M is a penetrating strike mark. It actually perforates the skin of the door and then stops at the B-pillar. And because the B-pillar did the job that it's supposed to do, it's actually designed to stop around. So there cannot be a secondary spot to put a rod in to create a trajectory.
Okay. So in terms of sites I, J, K, L, N, O, and P, do you have an opinion as to how fast the muzzle of the gun was moving when those shots were fired?
I don't have an opinion. I would say that they're not even methodical. They're scattered. There's no grouping with them. It's there's no methodical reason to it. It's senseless firing into a vehicle.
Okay. And in terms of which of these I, J, K, L, N, O, or P goes through and strikes the driver's side rear door? Do you know which of those that was?
Can I look at my report?
If you need to refresh your recollection, please.
Judge, could we get the date of the report? There's several reports.
Sure. Which report are you referring to, Detective?
November 16, 2021.
Okay.
The amended?
No, 16th, the initial.
They both say that. Okay.
It would be site M. M as in Mike.
Okay. So M is the one that you could connected through to the other side?
Yes.
Okay. Detective, I'm sorry, I thought you said M stopped at the B pillar.
Yeah, I read it. Let me look again.
Excuse me, thank you.
From the cold air, Judge.
It's freezing. My apologies, it's site K. K
Oh.
kilo.
K kilo. Okay. So when you are going through the rear of the car and documenting all of the strike marks, do you assign a letter to the one that you found in the B pillar?
That became site cube.
Okay. So in terms of the total number of projectiles that were fired from outside the car to the inside, how many were there? Sorry.
So we have 17.
And can you say the order of whether the ones to the back of the car happened first or the side of the car happened first on the outside?
No.
Can you say whether the shots inside the car happened first or the shots on the outside happened first?
Inside happened first.
So we talked a little bit about defensive wounds on that. Were there any defensive wounds on Anthony Williams?
No.
So there is testimony that there was a driver in a car. Could the driver, Cortland Henry, have gotten that angular shot on Anthony Williams?
No.
Why not?
He would have to have a rather large arm. Like, he'd have to be Inspector Gadget.
So in terms of, did you measure the height of Mr. Henry?
Yes.
And what was that height? If you need to refer to your report, please let me know.
He's 70.5 inches tall.
Okay. And in terms of his arm length, did you measure that?
No, I did not.
Okay. In terms of the height to his shoulder, did you measure that?
No.
So with regards to the length of his arm, why do you say he would have to have Inspector Gadget length arm to get that shot on Anthony Williams?
Because you would have to, it would be a very awkward position that his wrist is, no human wrist is simply capable of being in order to reach around, extend it out, and pull the trigger.
Okay. In terms of the intervening objects, how does that help you in saying where that firearm had to have been?
The firearm had to have been would be due to the headliner being there. The head rest being there. That all puts it all in line with the backseat driver passenger.
Okay. In terms of the angle for the driver to get the shot on Christopher Thomas, is that possible?
No.
Why not?
Because the injury to Christopher Thomas's cheek is an exact circle, and if Cortland Henry is pointing back from the driver's seat to the direction of the position of Christopher Thomas, you would expect to see a leading edge injury to his cheek instead of a perfectly circle on his cheek.
Okay.
On top of it, you would see more blood on the seat that Cortland Henry was sitting in for both. If he were to make both shots of those two individuals, there would be a substantial amount of blood on his seat.
Okay. Now, speaking about the rear passenger, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury or identify who was in that seat?
The rear passenger,
Yes.
driver's side,
Yes.
I was advised that it was
Objection, hearsay.
So, without going into that, in terms of what you were advised, can you say, based on your own personal knowledge, who was sitting in that seat at the time of this homicide?
that would be Mr. Demens.
Okay. And how can you say that?
Objection, can we approach?
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, there was an objection to the last question and answer. I sustained it. You are to disregard the last question and answer. Counsel will repeat her question, but you are to ignore the last question and answer.
So, Sergeant Williams, can you give an area of the car with which the shots emanated from?
Yes.
And could you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what area of the car did the shots that killed Anthony Williams emanate from?
From the driver's side back seat.
As to the shot that killed Christopher Thomas, where did that shot emanate from?
Driver's side back seat.
Okay. Is it possible for there to have been two shooters inside that car?
No.
Why not?
There is no time.
So explain what that means.
So, Mr. Williams was not even aware he was about to be shot. When Mr. Williams was shot, Mr. Thomas puts up his hands and is shot, and then is shot again.
Okay.
There's no time for anybody to switch a firearm. If there were, I believe one of those individuals would be alive. There's no time to switch. It was a very, a rather rapid event of firing.
Okay. Can you say the length of time between the fatal shots and then the staged drive-by shots later on?
It was enough time for the heart to stop beating, for there to be no circulation due to the wounds that I examined from the medical examiner's office. None of the wounds have any blood in them, which tells me that they're all ante-mortem wounds. So the time was long enough for the heart to stop beating.
Okay. Is there scientific or medical testing to recreate that in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, it's knowledge. I'm sure the medical examiner could say the same thing.
So in terms of, it's nothing that can be recreated with a live human?
Correct.
In terms of the number of shots, you said 17 outside the car. How many rounds were fired inside the car?
3.
And can you exclude the shots to the head for Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas as coming from outside of the car?
Yes.
How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury that, for example, shot that was marked as H in the, here, let's go to 6755. How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that shot H is not the one that wound up in the face of Mr. Thomas?
Because Mr. Thomas is already crumpling at this point, and he is actually he's in the clear, if you will, of site H.
How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that site H is not the shot to the back of the head of Anthony Williams?
Because site H continues and strikes Anthony Williams in the shoulder.
In terms of site K, the one that goes completely across the car, how can you tell that no one was sitting in the rear driver's side seat when that bullet came through the car?
It would have hit their legs.
Was there any sign of blood or anything on that seat?
There were signs of blood on the seat, yes.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is Blue Star? You've talked about it a little bit.
Blue Star is a chemical that is used in forensics. It's very similar to what most people know as luminol.
What's the difference between the two?
Luminol is a very caustic chemical, and it's not really healthy to use. It's effective, but it's not really healthy to use. Blue Star accomplishes the same thing. It still detects blood diluted up to 100,000 times, and it's not caustic.
Oh.
So it's attracted, luminol and Blue Star, they're both attracted to the Hemi group of blood, primarily iron, and it will detect trace amounts of blood even after it's been washed. So if you have blood on your shirt and you throw it in the wash, and throw it in the dryer, and then hand it over to me, I'm going to tell you to put it back in the wash because there's blood on it still.
Okay. What if it's been 5 years?
You'll still get that result.
Okay. And what type of result are we looking for?
We're looking for blood.
And so what does it look like if there is blood?
So if there is blood, and that's the other difference between luminol and Blue Star. With luminol, the illumination of the luminescence of the blood, the hemi group, is not as bright, and it is not as lasting. So you have to be very quick with your photograph in order to get it. With Blue Star, it is very bright and it's lasting, so it's long enough for us to get a photograph of it multiple times, and if we need to, we can come back and squirt it.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a singer and an actress. Cinnamon. It's my stage name.
That's so dope. What do you think about going out to LA?
It's kind of a long shot.
Do you believe in your music?
So is there a version that the sheriff's office uses now? More so than the other? Is there a preference?
We primarily use Blue Star.
Before we end, is that something you could demonstrate here in court as to how Blue Star works?
Yes.
Do you have some with you?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to state would be asking you to admonish it and how the Blue Star works?
You have the show to counsel.
Counsel?
Go ahead.
No.
Need some assistance there?
Detective Williams, if you would be so kind.
Go ahead.
While they're doing?
No, I asked you, I see you move, so I... Hold on, counsel. He wants to take a look at it.
What are we gonna do?
How Blue Star works?
So, ladies and gentlemen, I understand one of your members needs a restroom break. We'll take a short recess to not discuss the case. Don't form any opinion about the case. Don't allow anyone to discuss the case in your presence or no research. Just leave your notepads on your chair. Thank you. I thought, I didn't see any reaction from you. I didn't see you do anything, so I didn't think you were interested in doing it. That's why I said go ahead.
He's getting old, Judge. He needs a little more time to move.
No, I apologize. All right. Mr. Dennis, need a restroom break? Nope. All right. Thank you. We're in recess.
Welcome back, and thanks for sticking with us here at Law and Crime, where we continue to follow the trial of Jamel Demons, better known as YNW Melly. A shooting reconstruction expert, Sergeant Christopher Williams, is still on the stand. Let's go back into court in Broward County. Hear his testimony.
6723, are you showing the same thing?
Yes.
Going to 6730. What are you demonstrating with this trajectory rod and this photo?
So this is the suspected trajectory of the flight path of the projectile that went into Anthony Williams. Again, as I stated, Mr. Williams had his head canted to the right, which is the reasoning for the flight path and its continued perforation into the window, perforated the window and exited the vehicle.
So, Sergeant Williams, I want to ask, were the driver's side window intact?
Yes.
Were you provided the keys to the car to be able to turn power on and to put them down for purposes of pictures if need be?
Yes.
So on 6732, what is, you showing the same thing as the last photo?
Correct. This is another demonstrative with the firearm canted and a downward with the ejection port facing down. And again, you would literally have to be leaning into the vehicle and onto the person who is seated in the rear passenger seat behind the driver in order to obtain that shot.
And is this the opposite angle?
That's one we already discussed.
Okay. Yes, you're right, 6733. Moving on to 6736.
What was the one just before that?
6735. And so in this instance, is this firearm, the magazine has been removed?
Correct, for safety purposes.
Okay. So going on to, again, like I was saying, 6736. What is this showing?
This is just another demonstrative of the firearm canted with the ejection port down and at an angle. Again, you would have to be pressed up against the back seat passenger that's behind the driver in order to obtain that shot.
Okay. And we'll get into in a little bit with the blue star as to why you put an individual there. So then you've gone on and showing now on 6739. What are you showing on this particular demonstrative photo?
That is a demonstrative photo showing that a firearm can be fired in the direction of Anthony Williams with the hand and with the elbow up, and the arm does not have to be fully extended in order to fire the firearm.
Okay. So in terms of the trajectories on the back of the car, I'm going to talk a little bit on that aspect. As to one that is labeled A, could you describe where that is on the vehicle?
That is in the rear hatch of the vehicle. It actually perforates the plastic. That whole back of the vehicle where it states Jeep is actually plastic. And it perforates the plastic, perforates the paneling that's on the inside of the vehicle, and it then enters into the bottom of the back seat.
Is that the projectile that you recovered?
Yes.
Okay. Going on to the other ones, we've already looked at 6760 and 6761. on 6755. Are you identifying these by the same letters that the Miramar Police Department assigned them?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the trajectories of B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, were you able to determine if there was a change in the angle side to side on them?
Meaning a shooter's changing
Changing lanes in a car, let's say.
So the majority of these shots was from a standing, stationary position.
And how can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that fact?
Because it's what's known as in firearms as a grouping. So it's grouped pretty close together, which means that the person's stationary, firing a firearm, and actually creating a grouping of. So if the person's moving, you won't have such a grouping. It'll be scattered.
If the vehicle was moving, would that affect it?
Yes.
In terms of the glass in the back, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury whether or not the rods that are indicated, and again the photo that we just looked at, 6753, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H at the top, I'm going to go to photo 6760, if the glass was in place when they went through?
So I would surmise that the first 2 or 3 rounds took out the glass altogether, and the rest of the rounds were not affected by the glass, and that is evident by the firearms unit of our lab being able